American Graffiti wasn't just a nostalgic joyride through the 1960s. It launched careers, reinvented movie soundtracks, and nearly broke its young director, George Lucas. Today, we're diving into 20 shocking behind-the-scenes facts that crash-landed with a tragic conclusion. Number 20. A cameraman was run over on set. If you think the only danger in American Graffiti was hot rods and late-night drag races, you're so wrong. One chaotic night in Petaluma, a camera assistant was mowed down by a cruising car. No stunt, no plan, just a full-blown accident that landed him, injured, in the hospital. The shoots were brutal, freezing nights, engines roaring inches from expensive cameras, and a crew pushing every limit to get the perfect shot. After this, they had to rethink just how close anyone got to the action because one slip could have been fatal. The same night brought a 5-alarm fire nearby. For a film about teenage recklessness, the set itself was living proof that sometimes reality can be even wilder than fiction. Number 19. Petaluma locals were furious about filming. While American Graffiti turned Petaluma into an icon of cruising culture, not everyone in town was thrilled about Hollywood taking over their streets. In fact, many locals were downright furious. For nearly a month, the production shut down main roads at night to stage the endless parade of hot rods, drag races, and neon-lit diner scenes. Businesses complained about losing customers, residents fumed at the sleepless nights, and some people even accused George Lucas of bringing chaos into their quiet community. Cars lined the streets until dawn, engines revved non-stop, and bright production lights made it feel like perpetual daylight. Things got so tense that Petaluma city officials nearly pulled the plug on the filming permits. Lucas and his crew had to scramble to keep locals calm while racing against their already tiny budget and brutal shooting schedule. Ironically, the same people who once hated the disruption now celebrate Petaluma as a piece of movie history. Number 18. A stunt double was used for Falfa's car explosion. The climactic car flip of Bob Falfa's sinister black '55 Chevy ends in a ball of fire so intense it looks like pure chaos. But what people don't know is that wasn't even the real Falfa car. The production team actually built a special burn car just for this shot, a gutted, non-running salvage yard Chevy that was dressed up to look like the real thing. They didn't want to risk destroying the actual hero vehicle, so when you see that flaming wreckage, you're really watching a stunt double sacrifice itself in the name of cinema. The fire itself wasn't an accident either. It was carefully set up by the crew, who staged the explosion for maximum visual impact. Still, on screen, it feels terrifyingly real, like Harrison Ford just cheated death by inches. And while cars were flipping and bursting into flames on set, the human drama was just heating up behind the scenes. Because not all the chaos was mechanical. Some of it was very personal. Number 17. Cindy Williams nearly got replaced. It's hard to imagine American Graffiti without Cindy Williams as Lori, the sharp, strong-willed girlfriend who holds her own against Richard Dreyfuss and Ron Howard. But believe it or not, Williams almost lost the role. Early test screenings left Universal executives unconvinced. Some thought she lacked the spark to balance Howard's earnest Steve. The studio even floated the idea of bringing in another actress just weeks before production. George Lucas, however, wasn't budging. He saw something in Williams, an authenticity, a down-to-earth quality that grounded the film's nostalgic fantasy. Lucas fought to keep her on, insisting that Lori needed to feel like the girl next door rather than a polished Hollywood archetype. The gamble paid off. Williams not only delivered, she stole scenes with her blend of vulnerability and toughness. Ironically, just a few years later, she'd become a household name on Laverne and Shirley. But in 1973, she was one studio note away from being erased from movie history. Number 16. Police shut down production. Shooting American Graffiti on the streets of Petaluma wasn't exactly smooth cruising. The filmmakers didn't have the kind of blockbuster budget or clout that earns endless permits and city cooperation. Instead, Lucas and his crew worked on razor-thin schedules, closing off downtown blocks just long enough to grab a scene before the town grew restless. But the tension eventually boiled over. After repeated complaints about the late-night noise, blinding lights, and traffic disruptions, local police had enough. In the middle of filming, they literally shut down the production, forcing the crew to scramble, beg for extensions, and even move certain shots to less populated areas. It was a nightmare for Lucas, who was already fighting to keep the project on schedule and under budget. Yet the chaos ended up feeding the film's authenticity. Those tight windows of shooting gave the movie its raw, kinetic energy, like the whole thing could be shut down at any second, because, in reality, it nearly was. Number 15. Lucas nearly lost his crew to a car crash. When George Lucas filmed American Graffiti's climactic drag race, he wasn't just rolling cameras, he was practically testing limits. To capture the speed and intensity of the roaring engines, Lucas had his team mount cameras dangerously close to the action. But one night on Friday's Road outside Petaluma, disaster nearly struck. A hot rod tore down the strip so fast that the vibrations almost shook a rig loose. Crew members were standing just feet away when the vehicle skidded, and for a heartbeat it looked like the production would end. Not with a box office smash, but with ambulances. Lucas called an emergency halt. The shaken crew scrambled, re-rigged the gear, and only after double-checking every bolt and brace did they dare resume shooting. The sequence you see on screen, burning rubber, headlights blazing, two cars locked in cinematic combat, was filmed on the knife's edge of a real tragedy that thankfully never came. But as close as the crew came to disaster on the strip, the real shocker was about to hit because the star of the show, Richard Dreyfuss, nearly pulled the plug on his entire run. What happened next could have changed American Graffiti forever. Number 14. Richard Dreyfuss nearly ended his run. One night, during a break in filming, Paul Le Mat, already known for his unpredictable tough guy behavior, decided to get a laugh at Dreyfuss's expense. He suddenly scooped up his co-star and hurled him straight into a swimming pool. But this wasn't a safe prank. Dreyfuss hit the bottom of the pool hard, splitting his head open in the process. For a terrifying moment, everyone thought the production had just lost one of its leads in a pool accident. Dreyfuss survived, but the cut left him shaken and furious. Cast and crew whispered afterward about how wild the set really was, with booze, exhaustion, and adrenaline blurring the lines between fun and recklessness. So when you see Kurt nervously navigating Modesto's chaos, remember, Richard Dreyfuss had his fair share of disaster hidden behind the scenes. Number 13. The Deuce Coupe was resurrected from a junkyard. The most iconic car in American Graffiti, John Milner's bright yellow 32 Ford Deuce Coupe wasn't some pristine collector's gem. In fact, this legend of the silver screen was literally dug out of a junkyard. When the production team went hunting for authentic hot rods, they discovered the stripped-down shell of a 32 Ford sitting neglected among piles of scrap. Most people saw rust and junk. But to the car builders hired for the film, it was an opportunity. They rebuilt it piece by piece, installing a 327 Chevy engine, adding headers, and giving it that striking yellow paint job that would later blaze across cinema history. It moved like it had a mind of its own, commanding attention, daring the world to keep up, and leaving a mark no other car could match. And to think, it all started in a scrap yard, waiting for its resurrection. Maybe that's how my physical body will one day be created too. Number 11. Harrison Ford was mostly hammered. Before he was Han Solo or Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford was Bob Falfa, the cocky cowboy in a black 55 Chevy. But what you didn't see on screen is that Ford often showed up to set completely hammered. Ford wasn't a major star yet, and he wasn't taking the low-budget production too seriously. According to George Lucas and other cast members, he would sometimes roll into night shoots after drinking, buzzing with that reckless, devil-may-care energy that made Falfa so unpredictable. However, Lucas just let him roll on with it. In fact, Ford later admitted he didn't even know how to drive stick at the time. Combine that with a few too many drinks, and you had a dangerously authentic performance of a cocky hot rodder who thought he could take anyone on. What could have been a production disaster ended up giving the film some of its most chaotic electric energy. Falfa wasn't acting unhinged. He was. If you're loving these behind-the-scenes secrets as much as we are, drive into that like button and subscribe because the chaos wasn't all on the screen. Just wait until you hear about the crash that wasn't meant to happen. Number 10. Credits as currency. American Graffiti wasn't just groundbreaking on screen, it quietly changed Hollywood behind the scenes. George Lucas was so strapped for cash during production that he couldn't afford to pay everyone who worked on the film. His solution: screen credits. At the time, credits were usually reserved for department heads, the director, the producer, the lead crew. But Lucas broke tradition, offering credits to crew members in lieu of payment. It was a desperate but brilliant workaround that gave recognition where none had been given before. This small act of necessity actually birthed a Hollywood tradition. Today, the long credit rolls you see at the end of movies, the gaffer, the production assistants, the catering team, trace back to American Graffiti. What started as Lucas's budget fix became the industry standard. In other words, the film didn't just immortalize the early 60s, it also made sure the little guys in Hollywood finally got their names up in lights. Number 9. Shot in the dead of night. If American Graffiti feels drenched in the magic of night, that's because it was. George Lucas shot almost the entire film between 9 p.m. and sunrise. Every drag race, every diner conversation, it was all captured in the dead of night. But what looked effortless on screen was brutal off camera. The California nights were cold, sometimes dropping into the 40s. Cast members dressed in thin t-shirts for continuity would huddle under blankets between takes, teeth chattering. Crew members napped in unused cars when exhaustion hit, waiting for their turn to roll cameras again. That bone-deep chill gave the film its authentic sleepy town midnight feel, but it also meant everyone on set was constantly fighting off shivers. Number 8. Cars were paid for with burgers and pocket change. The endless parade of hot rods in American Graffiti looks like a $1 million car show. But in reality, George Lucas could barely afford gas money. The film's budget was so razor-thin that renting or leasing dozens of pristine vintage cars was out of the question. Instead, Lucas turned to the local community. Car owners who were proud of their customized 50s rides jumped at the chance to see their wheels immortalized on the big screen. Their payment? A measly $20 to $25, barely enough to cover a tank of gas in 1972, and free food from the movie's catering tables. So these cars weren't background filler because while the actors were grinding through all-night shoots, the cars paid for with burgers and pocket change quietly became the soul of the movie. The human deals, however, were a little trickier because Harrison Ford nearly walked off the set over just $15. Number 7. Harrison Ford almost walked for $15. It's hard to imagine American Graffiti without Harrison Ford's cocky cowboy racer, Bob Falfa. But believe it or not, Ford almost never slid into that hot rod. The reason? Money, or rather, the lack of it. At the time, Ford wasn't the megastar we know today. He was a fledgling actor trying to support his family, and carpentry in Hollywood was paying his bills better than film roles. When George Lucas first offered him $485 a week to play Falfa, Ford turned it down flat because he could earn more swinging a hammer than revving an engine on camera. Only after Lucas sweetened the deal by bumping his salary up to $500 a week did Ford reluctantly agree. That tiny $15 difference kept him in the cast, setting him on the path that would later lead to Star Wars and Indiana Jones. In hindsight, that $15 might be the best investment Lucas ever made. Number 6. Terry the Toad's crash was 100% real. Sometimes the funniest moments in movies aren't written at all, they're accidents. That's exactly what happened when Charles Martin Smith, playing Terry the Toad Fields, lost control of his little motor scooter outside Mel's diner. The scene was meant to be a smooth ride-up, but Smith's brakes had other plans. He panicked, swerved, and smashed straight into a trash can. What viewers did not realize was that crash wasn't in the script. It was a total fluke. But George Lucas, always hunting for authenticity, saw cinematic gold in Smith's genuine flailing and decided to keep it. That unscripted wipeout gave Toad the clumsy, lovable edge audiences still remember. And it's a perfect example of how Lucas spun chaos into character. Instead of a polished Hollywood stunt, viewers got raw, awkward comedy, straight from reality. Number 5. The blonde was never supposed to exist. One of American Graffiti's most haunting subplots is Kurt's obsession with the mystery blonde in The White Thunderbird, played by a then-unknown Suzanne Summers. She doesn't speak, barely appears, yet somehow steals the movie with just a glance. But actually, she was never meant to be real at all. George Lucas originally intended the blonde to exist only in Kurt's imagination, a dreamlike symbol of the unattainable future that always seems just out of reach. A special sequence was planned to reveal the truth, confirming that Kurt's pursuit was a fantasy projection rather than flesh-and-blood romance. But the movie's razor-thin budget killed the idea. That scene was never shot, leaving the blonde simply as an enigma. By accident of circumstance, the blonde became one of cinema's great unanswered questions, an illusion cruising endlessly down memory lane. And while Kurt was chasing a mystery that might not have even been real, another secret was hiding in plain sight, because George Lucas was in the film. Number 4. Lucas voiced the pizza guy. George Lucas poured everything into American Graffiti. His money, his nerves, his sleepless nights. But did you know he even lent his voice to the film? In one scene, DJ Wolfman Jack makes a prank call to a pizza parlor. You never see the poor employee on the other end, but you do hear him. That frazzled voice? It wasn't an actor. It was George Lucas himself. That's right, the future creator of Star Wars moonlighted as a pizza shop worker. Why? Because the budget was so tight, Lucas couldn't afford to hire extras for throwaway lines. So he stepped in, grabbed the mic, and immortalized himself as a confused fast food employee. It's a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo, but it perfectly captures Lucas's scrappy, do-it-yourself approach. Before he was a Hollywood giant, he was a guy pinching pennies, voicing pizza orders in the middle of the night. Number 3. Majority of the cast were too old for school. American Graffiti sells itself as the ultimate high school time capsule. Cruising, romance, rebellion, and one last night of teenage freedom. But almost nobody on screen was actually a teenager. Out of the entire cast, only Ron Howard and Charles Martin Smith were the real deal at 18. Everyone else? They were well past it. Harrison Ford was already turning 30 during filming, playing a hot-headed street racer like he'd just borrowed his dad's car. Cindy Williams, Paul Le Mat, Richard Dreyfuss, all in their 20s, passing as wide-eyed kids trying to figure out their futures. And then, at the other extreme, you had 12-year-old Mackenzie Phillips playing teenager Carol, making her one of the youngest actors in the entire production. It's a wild age gap, but somehow it worked. The cast brought enough energy and awkward charm to convince audiences they were all just kids killing time before sunrise. Number 2. The water balloon wasn't supposed to land on Carol's face. Sometimes the best movie moments come from freak accidents. Take the scene where Carol is cruising the strip with John Milner. A carload of pranksters hurls a water balloon at them. The plan? It was supposed to smash harmlessly against the car frame, making for a fun little gag. But that's not what happened. Instead, the balloon veered off course and exploded right in Phillips' face, drenching her in an icy splash. She wasn't prepared, she wasn't acting, and that giggle you hear, That's her genuine, startled laugh. Director George Lucas kept it in because it added exactly the kind of spontaneous realism he wanted for American Graffiti. And now, the moment we've been racing toward, this last fact, it's the most jaw-dropping tragedy hiding in American Graffiti. Number 1. The airplane met a tragic fate. At the end of American Graffiti, Kurt hops aboard a Douglas DC-7 and disappears into the night sky, chasing the future. But here's what most people don't know. This wasn't just any airplane. Built in 1956, this DC-7 had racked up a wild resume. At one point, it was leased to the rock legends Grand Funk Railroad, hauling the band and their mountain of amps across the country at the height of their fame. For 3 decades, the aircraft bounced between airlines, charters, and even rock and roll tours. It looked timeless on screen, but time eventually caught up. On its final flight in 1986, the very same DC-7 crashed, killing 3 crew members. So while Kurt's departure feels like a hopeful send-off, audiences had no clue that the plane itself was destined for tragedy. The film captured it as a symbol of new beginnings, but history rewrote it as a flying ghost, forever linked to both rock and ruin. American Graffiti, a film shot on a shoestring budget in freezing California nights with a cast of half kids and half struggling nobodies. Now tell me, which of these behind-the-scenes truths blew your mind the most? Drop it in the comments, and if you love the ride, hit that like and subscribe so we can keep unearthing the wildest secrets hiding in Hollywood history. And all that jazz.
Wow, that was weird.